Hey everybody, Jaffles here, and just wanted to do a quick informal teach around some of the Wild Kingdom expansion modules that we're going to be featuring in the upcoming Wild Round game. So everything that we've been playing in the Champions Invitational so far is present in the base game for the Old King's Crown. Now, available with the Kickstarter is also the Wild Kingdom expansion, which is where they put some of the crazier ideas that came up during development that didn't quite make it into the base game, but the developers loved a little too much to let them go. As you can see here in our automated mod, there are a ton of different modules that make up this piece. For the Wild Round, we're just going to be playing with 3 of them, and they're honestly 3 of the more tame ones. So if you want to see some of the truly crazy ones, I'd definitely check out the rules around something like Negotiation Table or Whispering Tower. Those can really turn the game on its head. We're not going to torment our players too much with a bunch of new content, but we are going to spice things up with some of these modules. So let's go ahead and start our game and check them out. You can immediately see we are stacking the deck with a bunch of Wild Kingdom cards. So the way that this module works is essentially there are a bunch of just Kingdom cards with, quite frankly, insane powers, and you can put either 5, 10, or 15 of them into the Kingdom card deck. You also winnow the deck down to a 30 card size overall. So with our kind of standard option here, we're going to be playing with a 30 card Kingdom card deck, and 10 of those are going to be these new Wild Kingdom cards. Let's see if any of them showed up. Oh, we do have a good one that just showed up immediately. This is honestly one of the crazier ones. So as an example, we can see here we have Binding Stone, which allows you to spend lore to acquire opponents' cards from their site of power. So as gathering, I could take Riders of the North Sky if it's still on someone's site of power. Obviously, this is kind of insane, which is why it's in that Wild Kingdom expansion, but is a good example of some of the crazy powers that you can expect to come into play throughout the course of this game. Being able to kind of steal opponents' cards and make them part of your own deck introduces a new concept to the game called allies, which I'll discuss in just a little bit. But for introducing kind of that first module, it's really just an influx of insane Kingdom cards that almost make things like Ring or Ruined Citadel look a little bit boring in comparison. So strategies that focus around Kingdom cards, such as the Uprising's Moonshine Cove, will probably get a chance to really shine here because there's going to be so many insane effects available for players to grab. The next module that I want to highlight is pretty self-explanatory. It's what's called the Night Map. So you'll notice that we now have a map that has been procedurally generated. The shrine and the castle are together, the battlefield and the wilderness, the necropolis and the harvest field, and this is going to be randomly generated every time we boot it up. So for our actual Wild Round game, we're probably going to see a different arrangement than we're looking at right here. And I'll go ahead and move the Kingdom's Favor over to the harvest field where it belongs. Our auto mod doesn't quite take that into account. But essentially, without introducing any new rules, this is going to make players have to reevaluate the way that they look at regions. A lot of times, Lowlands is really not that worthwhile early game. You don't need to bring cards back through the Necropolis or through the Shrine. But now, Harvest Field and Castle, 2 of the strongest early game location rewards, are also sharing space with something that's a little less exciting. So players will have to evaluate both early and late game, and kind of the traditional approach to some of these regions may not bear out. It might be really hard to get access to Necropolis, for instance, because people are going to be constantly fighting over Harvest Field, like they normally do throughout most of the game. So players are going to have to be a little bit more adaptable in how they're approaching these regions based on the way that the map is shaped. The last module that we're using is the Legendary Creatures module, and there's a few more rules involved with that, but it's really nothing too bad. So I'm repping the clans here because clans are my personal favorite faction. And we've got my good friend, Mr. Giant Scary Bear, who is the legendary creature for the clans. Now, what this does is it gives us access to one new card, as well as this legendary creature's piece. Now, as you can guess, this kind of reminds you of a herald. And if you're thinking that, you're pretty much exactly on the money. With legendary creatures in play, players are going to essentially have 2 heralds that they can then place on the map. I'll go ahead and kind of skip through some steps here so that you can see. It's nice. Our auto mod will actually, go ahead and move these up here for us to place on the board. But, these are acting as heralds. So if I win this region, I can get my herald bonus, I can steal from opponents, and all of our opponents are going to have their second herald as well. So we're going to have, instead of 3 heralds on the map, there's going to be 6. So first of all, that is just going to be a lot more stealing, a lot more opportunity to trigger herald bonuses. Overall, kind of the econ of the game is going to skew a lot higher because people are just going to be getting a lot more points. Now, a really important rule that applies to these double heralds is that they can never be stacked in the same location or region. I believe it is region. I will edit that into the video just to make sure it's clear. All right, future Jaffles here. I just looked it up. So these 2 heralds cannot share the same location, but they can share the same region. So an arrangement like this is valid. An arrangement like this is invalid. Now, like I mentioned, these are essentially acting as 2 heralds. Any effects that would impact heralds, herald rewards, they all apply to both of these pieces that are on the board. Now, where this adds one more little wrinkle is with these legendary creature cards. So how do you actually acquire one of these? It all will start in a player's supply, and the way that you win these is by actually losing a clash in a region where your legendary creature piece is. I guess thematically, if your faction fails, then the creature decides to come in and lend its aid, perhaps. But essentially, by putting a creature piece somewhere and not having this card in hand, you could interpret that as essentially saying, I'm going to try to deliberately lose here to gain access to this really powerful card. Now, this is a 13 strength card. That is the highest printed strength that's on a card. They're not invulnerable or resilient, so they are weak to eliminate, but from a raw strength perspective, you basically can't beat one of these. And it does have a really strong effect where, in addition to any herald reward that you'll get, if you play this into a clash where your legendary creature piece is, you will also gain a lore and another influence. So there's kind of 3 states of mind games here. If the creature is not in your hand, typically you want to lose where your piece is so you could gain access to that card. If that card is available to you, you can probably expect that somebody is going to play their creature on top of where they have placed their creature token. At least you would assume they would want to in order to get that additional lore and influence bonus. So what this all will really amount to is a lot of bluffing and a lot of shenanigans with heralds, and I'm really excited to see it. Honestly, the last piece that's worth highlighting is just the winter effect that's on all of these. So essentially, if the card is not in your hand or supply or burned, I don't know why you would ever burn one of these. Actually, this could be hilarious with Ritual of the Tooth. That might actually be something we see happen in the game. But essentially, if the card is active somewhere, then it just returns to your supply, and you have to re-earn it by losing a clash in a region where you have that piece. So should be really interesting. I'm excited to see what players do with these new powerful cards. I definitely think we'll see some shenanigans from either the Tooth or the Eye during these games. And I mean, the kingdom cards themselves are just absolutely insane. I was happy to see Binding Stone come out. Let's see what other ones it put in here. There were a few that I wanted to highlight. Oh, this one. This one is, I think, really good. I ranked this highly in my initial tiering of these, and I still really feel that way. So at the end of the game, you just gain through influence, which is already just absolutely insane. And it technically, for the only time that it would count, which is if you're tied, it just counts as a fourth influence and ignores that tiebreaker clause with the kingdom's favor. So if anyone plays Dune Imperium, this is basically like the Chommer Key tactic tile, but even better because it actually just not only wins you tiebreakers, but it gives you points. So I hope this one shows up. I think it's a really cool one. Oh, the laboratory is also hilarious. This is another way to steal cards. So this allows you to move any card, not just any one of your cards, but any card from the lost pile into your hand. And for the rest of the game, that card just counts as yours. So if someone has the laboratory and they're killing stuff, they can also harvest those corpses and turn them into soldiers. So that's very cool, very fun, very thematic. I just love the art on this one because it has a fat dragon on it. But yeah, there are some really cool ones. Definitely excited to see some of these come out, and we'll certainly highlight them on stream as they come into play. But yeah, some very strong effects. Now, the last thing to cover is basically what happens if you do steal one of these cards. Let's say, you know, something horrible happens and, well, that can't really easily get into the lost pile, but, you know, let's say the 6 goes into the lost pile and I use the laboratory to grab it and put it in my hand. Now, any card that's in your hand that has a different color than your faction color, it's essentially an out-of-faction card, is called an ally. Some of the other modules in the Wild Kingdom expansion allow you to get allies in other ways, such as these aeronaut cards. But for this particular game, the only way allies are going to show up are if some of these Wild Kingdom cards come out and people start stealing from each other. Now, when you're bidding either on the Great Road or when you're coming in and placing faction cards at regions, essentially people have to declare allies first. So there's going to be kind of an additional check or step that's going to happen when bidding cards. So if I wanted to bid this 6 and put it out, I would have to put it out, ask if anyone else is playing allied cards. If that answer is no, then I go ahead and place the rest of my cards as normal, and other players would do that simultaneously as well. Obviously, people are going to know exactly what this is if they're keeping track, so allies have that kind of disadvantage of not being able to be played anonymously. So definitely some pros and cons there, but being able to steal strong cards from other factions and force them to incur attrition could definitely be really nasty. So I'm really excited. The Wild Kingdom expansion is really fun, especially if you have a strong grasp on the base game. So excited to show it off a little bit, see some Kingdom card shenanigans, some stealing shenanigans, and yeah, hope everyone shows up for the stream. Hope to see you there. We'll be updating the time once we have that coordinated with all our players. Bye!